Prepare to be captivated by the business story of the week, hosted by me, Shaheen Shan. Join us on a journey through the twists and turns of entrepreneurial triumphs and setbacks. Immerse yourself in the narrative and witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. This is Business Story of the Week.
And welcome back, folks. Welcome back to Business Story of the Week. I am your host, Joshua, once here, once again. And the question is for today: what if there was no such thing as a genetic disease or an incurable disease? What if science of epigenetics has superseded the limitations of diagnosis? What if every chronic symptom was an invitation to explore the cause, which once addressed will free you from your symptoms from the inside out? Well, that is exactly what we are going to talk about today with our guest. Neil Cannon is a holistic health and healing expert whose journey began with a 30-year battle with eczema and a life altering stroke suffered by his father. These events led Neil to delve into chronic inflammation as an underlying cause of many health challenges, including his own eczema as well in his family. Since 2015, Neil has been helping people reverse chronic illness by addressing the root cause of promoting harmony across physical, mental, emotional, and energetic aspects through his four pillars of vitality. And we are going to engage on that today. The author of The Vitality Code, The Vitality Secret, who is about to reveal what he calls the four pillars of vitality. Neil, thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you, Joshua. Really a pleasure and an honor to be here on your show. Thank you for hosting me or inviting me. I'm doing well, thank you. I'm just in the UK and resettling after a little trip to Europe.
Well, that is such a great, it must be a great day for you there, mid noon, right? Correct. And thank you for being on here and taking the time. Neil, I really want to get really into this real quickly, but first, let's go way back. Where did this all begin? 30-year battle with eczema, your father having the same underlying cause, so to speak. Talk to us a little bit about that. How did you notice early on in your family that this is something that ran, you know, is it a genetic disease? Is it inherited? What is the story of Neil Cannon?
Well, thank you, Joshua. As you likely know, I sense you know that most people, if not everyone who works in holistic health, comes with their own story of healing something, reversing something.
Hmm.
And that's exactly my case. So I had eczema for, as you said, 30 years. And during this
Uh-huh.
time, since I was a toddler, I was always given symptom masking treatments, steroid creams,
Oh,
prescription moisturizers,
yes.
antibiotics when it got
Yes.
really bad. You can relate. I remember you saying just before the call. So you know what I'm talking
Hmm.
about. These kind of treatments that never actually addressed the cause. So all I was doing
Hmm.
is treating the symptom, and thus it kept on coming back. And I was a lucky
Yes.
one. I mean, I've only lost pigmentation on my skin. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a little bit around
Oh,
my
wow.
wrist and hands. So that's from overuse of steroid creams for a very long time.
Yes.
And in my
Yes.
early 30s, I discovered its underlying cause because of a roundabout way, really, because my father suffered a stroke. And I
Uh-huh.
remember a few years prior to my dad's stroke that his sister, my naturopathic doctor, aunt,
Hmm.
had told him that he had chronic inflammation, that his blood was
Hmm.
toxic, and she was actually
Hmm.
advising him at the time to get the mercury out of his mouth because he had very high levels of
Hmm.
mercury. So he had chronic
Hmm.
inflammation. And I remember this, I remember him telling me in the kitchen in the family home. It's like one of these weird memories that is so clear to me. And he said, I've got chronic inflammation. I don't know what that means. And several years later,
Right.
excuse me, he suffered the stroke. So around the time of his stroke, I was thinking, hang on, I've discovered this thing called inflammation. I'd actually just written a book about raising testosterone naturally for guys. So I'd just
Right.
started to become familiar with this thing called inflammation. And then I started researching
Hmm.
and thinking, isn't this the underlying cause of every illness? And this is what I was learning. So I was,
Precisely.
researching, watching documentaries and reading books, etc. And I quickly realized it really is just the underlying cause of almost every chronic health challenge,
Hmm.
including heart attacks and
Hmm.
strokes and cancers, and also the eczema I'd had since I was a toddler. And it was actually, there was
Right.
one book that spoke about it as an inflammatory disease. Now, I don't like the term
Right.
disease. I just like I prefer to use the term symptom, actually. Anyway,
Right.
I thought, okay, I've got inflammation. And I went on a very strict anti inflammatory diet and lifestyle, and it quickly went away. So
Hmm.
I never used the word cured because that suggests it will never
Yes.
come back. If I went and
Yes.
consumed a bunch of toxic food and my body
Hmm.
became inflamed again, the eczema would come back. So I'll
Yes.
never say it's cured, because
Yes.
I say it's a symptom.
Yes.
So if
Yes.
providing my body is clean and I'm not inflamed, I don't have eczema. And
Yes.
it's been this way for a
Yes.
decade or so. So inflammation became our
Wow.
topic, and I've helped people reverse many, many labels of illnesses by addressing that
Yes.
one thing. It's
It's
remarkable that
it,
the
this
same formula can be applied to so many different things.
it's remarkable. It truly is because your approach emphasizes addressing chronic inflammation, and you have discovered that this is the root of various health challenges, even including cancer, and that's quite remarkable. Could you elaborate a bit more on why or how chronic inflammation impacts the body in such a way that in such a profound way, and why is it often overlooked in traditional medical paradigms?
Love these questions, both of them. The second one is going to be controversial. I hope that's okay. So, first of all,
Okay, let's go. Let's get into it.
what is inflammation? We have to be grateful for it. It's a very healthy immune response. If we didn't have it, we'd die.
Yes,
So, it's our immune system's
precisely.
reaction to what it
Mhm.
perceives as an attack on the body. So, something foreign or
Yes,
alien, like an intruder, if you will, enters the body,
yes,
or the body is exposed to something foreign or alien,
yes,
the immune system goes into a state of defense. By the way, it's actually
yes.
that and also chronic stress, but I'll come on to chronic stress in a moment. So let's just think about a
Okay.
toxin. So the body responds to a toxin, and the immune system goes into defense mode, protecting us. It wants
Yes.
to
Hmm.
create. I refer to the immune system as your army of defenders. So it's really a
Right.
healthy thing. But when this happens again and again and again, the body starts to create symptoms depending on our genetic code. So for
Hmm.
me, that was eczema. For
Hmm.
someone else, it might be asthma. I kind of joke about it kind of being the weakest link. Like, it's not really a joke. It's like, it kind of is the weakest link. For me, it's eczema. For someone else, it might be asthma. For someone else, it might be diabetes. For someone else, it might be arthritis. For someone else, it might be ulcerative colitis, or someone, you get the idea. There's lots of different symptoms.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
inflammation is like it's the body's, well, the flame, it's the body's response to toxins.
Precisely. Yes.
So
Hmm.
a physical
Hmm.
threat, but also a perceived threat. So I say physical threat or perceived
Right.
threat because perceived threat is where stress comes into play.
Uh
So
huh.
if
Uh
we are
huh.
living
Uh
in
huh.
fight or flight, we are perceiving the body is
Hmm.
about to be attacked ultimately. And a lot of
Right.
people are living in this
Hmm.
moderate fight or flight day to day, responding to deadlines and demands and pressures from
Hmm.
work and
Hmm.
family and very real things. It's just that the
Hmm.
stress response means that we're living in this fight or flight state, and then that ends up causing
Right.
a weakness in the gut, which is 70 to 80% of the immune system, and it's ultimately that's what the chronic state creates, a chronic inflammatory response, and then
Yes.
it leads
Yes.
to symptoms. So that's basically what
Wow.
inflammation is. So I love to
Hmm.
just explain it so simply so the layman, anyone can understand
It
it.
is. It
Just think
was
of it.
very. Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Was that easy to understand?
It was pretty. It was very simple. It's probably the most simple explanation I have heard of inflammation. It truly is the flame of our body. I like that. I like how you put that into perspective. But
Yeah.
now to the second portion of that question, why is it overlooked?
Why is it overlooked? If everyone knew what inflammation is, everyone would test themselves for it regularly,
Right. Right.
and do something about it. So
Uh-huh.
if we all knew that if our markers of inflammation, let's take one example of a blood test, high sensitivity C-reactive protein, if that's elevated,
Mm-hmm.
the chances are the body's got symptoms, a symptom of sorts. It could be brain fog, it could be mildly, it could be depression. About a third of cases of
Yeah.
depression are directly linked with chronic inflammation, which means chronic inflammation of the brain,
Right.
neurodegenerative
Yes.
diseases. It's really everything.
Yes.
So if people knew what
Yes.
inflammation was and the media was educating people about it every single day, I'm not maybe not every single day,
Mm-hmm.
but you get the point. Let's say there was an effort to educate the masses as to what inflammation is, and there was an effort
Yes.
to ensure and empower people to show what it was.
Yes.
Look, if your levels are high, you need to detoxify
Mm-hmm.
the body and put more fuel in.
Mm-hmm.
That's ultimately what I do with my clients,
Yeah.
by the way. I try and simplify
Right. Right.
everything. Toxins
Mm-hmm.
out, fuel in.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
let's say there's a pharmaceutical industry, which is $4.3 trillion a
Yes.
year in America. I recently heard Robert F.
There
Kennedy
we go.
Jr., whether you like him or not, he gave a quote that I thought was really good. $4.3 trillion is spent on quote unquote healthcare every year, 86% of which
Yes.
is spent on chronic illness.
Oh God.
86% of chronic
Goodness.
illness. That means
Oh,
86% of $4.3 trillion is spent on symptoms of inflammation,
precisely. Oh,
which means I should be a very rich man by now.
you
The,
should be.
that was a silly point. But the point is, the drugs that are used are highly profitable, patent backed drugs.
Yes.
And providing people
Yes.
get healthy, they are no longer an asset to the pharmaceutical industry.
Of
So,
course.
steroids, repeat medication, antibiotics, repeat medication. A lot of people for eczema put
Yes.
on immunosuppressants. They suppress the immune system. Like red flag, giant red flag.
Yes.
What about the cause? So, and then of
Yes.
course, if you take one drug, which every single drug on the market comes with side effects, there's not a single drug on the market that does not come with
Of
side
course.
effects. And
Wow.
then that all normally creates inflammation, the very thing you want to heal. It creates inflammation of the gut,
Of course.
and it normally leads to another
Yes.
drug and or rather another diagnosis, and then more drugs down the road.
Uh-huh.
So we end up being
Yes.
just on this system, this spiral of the pharmaceutical industry, where we are
Mm-hmm.
just adding revenues to them. Basically, it's a recurring revenue a business model. That is
Mm-hmm.
what the pharmaceutical industry is. So, one
Yes.
of the greatest epiphanies I ever had in my whole life, by the way, was
Mm-hmm.
understanding the origins of Western medicine. And once we get our heads around this, it's a complete mind blowing epiphany for me. It was for me
Right.
when I
Right.
wrote
Right.
about it in the Vitality Code and the Vitality Secret. And
Yes, please.
do you want to hear about it?
Yes, please give us a gist of it. So right now we're recapping a little bit. $4.3 trillion medical, the pharmaceutical industry, 86% of which is spent on symptoms, not the underlying costs, not the underlying root of it. And this is because due to the history of Western medicine, which you now are introducing or have written in your book titled The Vitality Code, The Vitality Secret. Please delve into this. Briefly tell us the outline of or the history of Western medicine, and how does this relate to your four pillars of vitality?
Loving your questions, Joshua. So, yeah, the origins of Western medicine, I'll keep it really short and I'll try and keep it really simplistic. So,
Please,
prior
please.
to in the late 1800s and early 1900s, there were many approaches to medicine which were all natural medicine.
Yes,
So, naturopathic medicine, chiropractic medicine,
yes,
very eclectic herbal type medicines, and you get the idea. Many natural approaches to medicine. In 1910, the Flexner Report was commissioned by Rockefeller
okay,
and Carnegie,
right,
who had both set up. as or were masquerading as philanthropists, which, if we take a deeper look, it's
Philanthropist.
philanthrocapitalism. And they
Mm-hmm.
they initiated this report, the Flexner Report, which was a preordained report, which meant that they knew what the outcome was going to be. And the outcome was it would
Okay.
eliminate all competition to patent petrochemical medical education. In layman's terms,
Right.
what that did was it eradicated natural medicine. It just wiped it out in 1910 to create a strong bias towards drug intensive medicine train or medical, sorry,
Yes.
medical training. I kind of say medicine because I don't
Wow.
see drugs as medicine, actually. I actually see them as drugs.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
and drugs that they were manufacturing. So
Mm-hmm.
that happened in 1910. And over the next 40 years or so, they poured hundreds of millions of dollars into medical schools throughout the whole of the US to teach drug intensive medicine, or rather a bias towards drug intensive medicine. And in return for doctors to
Mm-hmm.
teach this form of medicine, the medical schools would then receive receive money. So the
Yes.
Rockefeller and Carnegie would donate into the medical schools, and there was a very interesting method with which they used to create this strong bias.
Oh my goodness.
So, and
Yes.
then the media was used. There's another part of it to,
Of course.
yeah. Without the media, people would continue using all forms of medicine. So, over the next 40 years, by 1950, if a doctor graduated without a Flexner approved degree, MD, he or she wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
get a job anywhere. And it's remained the same ever since. So,
Of
that is
course.
my understanding. I first understood this from watching the Truth About Cancer series, and then did my own research and bought other books, one of which is called Rockefeller Medicine. And then I verified it.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
even if one thinks that's a giant conspiracy, and even if there's
Okay.
no, that can't be true. What we can't deny is that it is scientifically proven that chronic
Okay.
inflammation is the underlying cause of chronic illness, and we can
Yes.
address chronic inflammation by detoxifying the body and putting fuel back in. Cancer is
Yes.
a massive industry. It's
Mm-hmm.
colossal.
Mm-hmm.
At the time of
Mm-hmm.
writing the Vitality Secret in 2016, I believe the figure was $185 billion a year on cancer alone, which you might think is
Right.
tiny compared to 4.3 trillion, but it's still a huge industry in America. So if the world were to be educated about inflammation and they were empowered, so you
Right.
do these tests,
Mm-hmm.
taking we take some useful tests, but they're not that useful.
Yes.
The tests that
Yes.
I get my clients to take are all related to inflammation, really, and there's
Mm-hmm.
other ones, hormone panels. And by the way, I'm not a medical doctor, so I always say it's up to them to work with their doctor to get absolute clarification on that. And what I do as a health coach is I work with them, and we use those tests
Mm-hmm.
as a benchmark against which to measure their progress. So then seeing
Yes. Okay.
that blood work change over the course of, say, 60 to 90 days, and then the symptoms
Okay.
disappear, you can just, it's a repeatable model. And then we don't
Of
need to be on
course.
drugs, and we can avoid surgery.
Oh
And
my.
a lot of the
My
time,
goodness.
obviously, I always want to say this, by the way, the pharmaceutical industry or the Western medical industry is amazing when it comes to emergencies.
Mm-hmm.
Phenomenal. It's virtually
Mm-hmm.
untouchable. So, and I'm grateful
Mm-hmm.
for it. Both my parents are alive thanks to
Mm-hmm.
Western medicine. I've got friends in England
Mm-hmm.
who are alive thanks to
Mm-hmm.
medicine. And got to be
Innovations and all
so
that.
mindful of that. So I don't want to just slam it completely. And I always see that it has
Mm-hmm.
merits. So I refer to it as emergency medicine, actually, and it's incredible.
Right.
It's just, when one has been through the system for 30 years and then I've worked with
Right.
people for almost 10 years now with a variety of different labels, it becomes clear that it's a revenue generating system.
It
It's
does
profit for
truly
health.
sound like it sounds like a huge mess. It does. I mean, especially with the way you put it, it's almost a sense of hopelessness, so to speak, right? Because it's this a common misconception is so ingrained in us that this Western medicine is the only way, and this Western approach is the only way. Not just in the West, actually. I mean, globally, it's probably the most major and most common approach when it comes to medicine, when it comes to treatment, and all that. But now we're it seems like we're fighting this massive misconception is this massive kind of I don't want to use a conspiracy word, right? But at the same time it truly does feel like a system, we're fighting against a system, so to speak, surrounding chronic illness, surrounding chronic healing, or rather inflammation and healing from that. With all the experiences that you've encountered, Neil, how do you address these misconceptions through your work?
Yeah, to be clear, the misconceptions in terms of the the
Um,
approach
w-
that is
w-
used.
yes, precisely. Mhm. And
So
how does your work come into that? And perhaps you can begin outlining to us your four pillars of vitality.
yeah, so in terms of misconceptions, I guess the easiest thing to say is I work with those who are already questioning the mainstream way of doing things, the conventional approach. and
Right,
and I
right.
don't spend much time persuading people. They're on this page or they're not,
Hmm.
or they're questioning.
Hmm.
They're at the tipping point. So it's got to come from a heart connection. Uh,
Of
yes,
course, of
basically,
course.
the intuition ultimately needs to be telling someone, "Hang on, something's not right here." It took me 30
Hmm.
years.
Hmm.
I'm a slow learner. My dad's stroke.
Okay.
A friend of mine yesterday posted on social media it's 1 year anniversary for complete reversal of cancer without any medical intervention. And I was on his
Hmm.
supporting
Hmm.
team. I'm not saying I cured it. I'm saying there's a few of us who were supporting him on the holistic path to
Hmm.
reverse it. And he did it in 2 months.
Right.
And I was listening to the podcast. I interviewed him on my podcast, and I said, "What was it that inspired you to do the holistic approach?" And I alluded to there being a heart connection and a knowing. Like there's an inner knowing sometimes. If something doesn't feel right,
Yes.
we need to follow that.
Yes.
And he
Of
said he
course.
looked into chemotherapy and he looked at, it's derived from mustard gas in the First and Second World Wars. It's really toxic and it's known to cause
Yes.
cancer.
Yes.
Chemo and radio are known to cause cancer. So he's like, hang on, that doesn't, none of that addresses the cause. That doesn't make sense to me. Why would I go and put that in my body if my body's clearly already toxic? So he went.
Right.
I run breath work every morning, Monday to Friday, and he rocked up one
Okay.
morning and he
Okay.
shared with us his diagnosis. And I jumped on the call with him afterwards, and we had a really great conversation. And I
Okay.
just knew he was going to do it with, I wouldn't say with ease, but I knew he would reverse it. And it wasn't an easy journey by any
Right.
means. And we watched the
Right.
toxins come out of his skin every morning. He was bright red. His skin was all red. And doing the breath work and all the detoxification protocols he was doing, he was literally oozing toxins. Anyway,
Oh my.
the point of that example is it's got to come from here to
Yeah.
and a desire to live and really, you know, it's there's got to come from an intuitive place that if something doesn't feel
Right.
right,
Right.
follow that intuitive knowing. And
Okay.
then, the crisis that one often has that leads people down the holistic path often leads to an incredible awakening and a whole new way of living, which is just
Of course.
phenomenal. He's now 69 and he's healthier,
Yes. Yes.
so much healthier than before the diagnosis.
Than
And his
ever.
meditations are
Wow.
going off the chart. He's going deep. He's getting pineal gland activations. It's really cool to see.
Wow.
So, into the four pillars. I don't know if that really answered the question about misconception. It's just understanding where we can absolutely honor Western medicine, and then where it's not
Yes.
to be used or used mindfully.
I do.
And yeah, That's
I do love the practical approach, so to speak, because most often time, in your field, or for most people who talk about like alternative medicines or alternative approach, or anyone who really talks about like conspiracies against the pharmaceutical industry, they completely dismiss the merits of Western medicine. Like you said, when it comes to innovations, when it comes to emerging diseases, they are unparalleled. And I love that practical approach. I love that kind of sort of balance because, they do have their merits and they do have saved a lot of lives. Neil, you have written your book, The Vitality Code. You share a lot of this, including the history of Western medicine. Show to us, there you go, the bit of that book there. Outline to us a little bit, why do you think, or how does your pillars or your research of what you've written, how do they contribute to an overall well-being and vitality?
Thank you for that question. So there's four pillars: physical, mental, emotional, and energetic. When most people start with their yeah. So when most people start off on the holistic path, or they want to reverse an illness, or they want
Right.
to optimize their body, most people start with diet. It's the most tangible place to start. I think most people can get their head around
Yes.
that we are what we eat. We've all heard it. It's an age-old
Yes.
adage,
Yes.
and
Mhm,
it's
mhm,
clear,
mhm.
it's tangible. Most people can understand that. If we're eating toxic food,
Yes.
it's going to create inflammation. That's not hard for people to understand. What's hard to understand
Mhm.
is how so much of what we consider to be food isn't food at all. There's probably
Of
90% of what we
course.
find on supermarket or grocery store shelves isn't food. It shouldn't be called food.
That's true.
Processed food,
I agree.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Anything fried, anything fake, processed, artificial flavorings, preservatives, hybridized wheat in America. This is one of the head. I was about to use an F word. It's a challenge for one person to get their head around what has happened to the wheat grain.
Yes.
So,
Hmm, hmm.
as an example, are you familiar with how people can go to Italy and France and eat gluten and they're fine, and they go to America and they have
Right.
gluten
Right.
and they get bloated and they break out in skin rashes and stuff or whatever else. The
Yes.
wheat grain in America
Mhm.
has been tampered with, gone through a process called it's hybridization, and it's
Mhm.
mutagenesis. So they've mutated the
Ooh.
original wheat grain. It went from a meter and a half tall crop to these dwarf crops. They're about a foot tall now. And
Oh my.
what what they've done is they've added, I believe, about 14 proteins to it, so the farmers can yield more in less time. So it makes sense
Yes.
from that perspective. And the
Yes.
thing is, that's not good for our gut. It's
Yes, of
terrible for
course.
our gut, in fact. And then it's
It
Roundup
is.
ready, which means it's laced in glyphosate, which is known to cause cancer. So that's not a good, that's like an inflammatory nightmare. So the first thing I recommend my
Yes.
clients do, or anyone, readers as well, is to replace wheat, particularly in America. Even in Europe, you can benefit from replacing wheat. But in America, it's been through this process. And anything GMO, genetically modified organisms,
Yes.
particularly
Yeah. Hmm.
corn and soy,
Hmm. Yeah.
cottonseed. There's a brilliant documentary called GMO OMG. Have you seen that?
GMO OMG. Yeah, it is. I've heard of that. Yes.
Really good documentary. It
Any
shows
anything anything. Oh, it's a revelation. It's a revelation. Everyone should watch it.
it, definitely, particularly if you're living in America, you'll want to swerve GMOs like the plague once you've seen that documentary. We can't,
Especially in America.
yeah.
I agree.
In Scandinavia, they don't allow GMOs because it's not been proven safe.
Oh, they don't.
And in
Wow. I
America,
didn't know
they
that.
say it's not been proven dangerous, except it has been. The FDA receives 65% of its funding from the industry it regulates. Say no more. There's nothing that can be proven safe
Say
in
no
just a couple of
more.
months. Yeah, say no more. And by the way, that's low compared to other regulatory agencies in the UK and Europe, and Australia, which is like 86,
Yes.
87, even 95%, I believe, in America, in Australia. So when you have a regulatory agency which is financed by the industry it regulates, that warrants a real critical eye as to what they approve. I'm not going to say
Talk about conflict of interest.
exactly. And then there's the revolving door situations between those, on the boards of pharmaceutical companies, and then they go into the boards of the regulatory
Of
agencies
course.
and the environment and EPA.
Yes, of course.
It's nuts. So back
And
to the pillars
this
and the nutrition.
that's the first pillar,
So start with nutrition. Most people
nutrition,
start with
diet.
nutrition. Take out the toxins. We need to understand that stuff has been approved for sale when it should not have been approved for sale. And we need to ask ourselves, is this real food or is it fake? If it's man-made, don't eat it. Am I eating real
Yes, of
food
course.
or am I eating stuff? The moment you take out stuff
Mhm.
and you eat food, things start to change. I had
Of course.
a conversation with someone recently. I didn't realize, but he'd read my first book and he just went to organic. And just by making that shift, I think he took out gluten as well. So many things changed for him. So if we take out stuff, put fuel in, that makes a big difference. Also, underneath the
Yes,
physical pillar is physical exercise, physical movement. If we're not
of course.
moving, we're not
Yes.
oxygenating. And if we're not oxygenating, we're
Yes,
depriving
that's true.
ourselves of the number one cell fuel, which is oxygen. Number two, water. Number three,
Yes.
nutrients. We have to get those
Yes.
in.
Ah,
And number four, really, is not really fuel, but it's an absolute fundamental requirement. We have to be able to eliminate waste and
mhm,
detoxify. And also, we need sunlight, we need grounding
of course. And that is done
and
through.
sleep.
Mhm, mhm.
So I've kind of just covered the physical in a nutshell. Nutrition,
Pretty
exercise,
much.
and then really understanding what toxins are, because inflammation isn't just about food; it's
Okay.
about any potential toxin. Anything that is
Yes, of
foreign
course.
that enters the body, anything foreign which
Mhm,
isn't in alignment with
mhm,
nature,
mhm.
or if the body is exposed to
Yeah.
something. Electromagnetic fields is a big one,
Good.
EMFs.
There you go.
And I won't go too much into that because I could talk for another hour on that. But let's just say in 2017, my immune system,
I bet you could.
yeah, the
But we,
reason,
we allow me to recap
yeah,
the pillars so far. Diet, nutrition, I relate to that. Very relevant to me. Again, I used to have eczema, and I got it under control when I fasted. I am
mm,
constantly on intermittent fasting now. I've been doing it for a while, and it makes sense because it removes the toxins, right? It got everything out there. Exercise. I also regularly exercise. You take out the toxins, you put in the oxygen, you give yourself vitality, you give yourself energy. And the third pillar to that, Neil, I understand, or correct me if I'm mistaken, is mental. Is that correct? Talk to us a little bit about that. Why is it important to our well being?
the,
Of course, it's obvious, but why?
yeah,
Tell
the
us.
mental piece is huge. Our thoughts can make us sick, or they can make us vital. We
Yes.
know with the placebo effect that we can heal the
Hmm.
body through thought alone. It's been scientifically
Yes.
proven.
Yes.
If you take this pill, which you believe in your whole being is going to get rid of your symptom, and through the sheer power of belief, you're taking that every day, maybe a few times a day for weeks, months, whatever,
Hmm.
and then almost by magic,
Hmm.
your body creates this whole pharmacy of chemicals completely and utterly perfect to heal the body. It's remarkable.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we cause a secretion of chemicals in the body conducive to healing if we are
Right.
having thoughts which are harmonious thoughts, put it that way. So if we
Yes.
believe that this pill that we take every day is going to heal us, the body will heal itself. That's basically what the
Right.
placebo effect has shown. I can't remember the exact statistic, but between 30 to 50% of randomized placebo trials, these placebo effect is responsible for around 30 to 50% of positive results. So it's quite,
That is a remarkable
it is,
statistic.
it really is. So we know that the
Wow.
body can heal with thought alone. And we also know that we can
Mhm.
create sickness, and that's called the nocebo effect. So if we wake up every
Nocebo.
single day and we have the same thoughts and the same beliefs, well, we have the same beliefs, we have the same thoughts, we have the same behaviors, the same actions, and we end up repeating everything every single day. And we associate, let's call it eczema. We can both relate to that one. If I wake up in the morning and I look at my face and I've got eczema,
Yes.
eczema, eczema, and I'm using this word, this term, this label all the time, I'm associating with this eczema. And I talk about it with all my friends and family. My eczema's so bad, my
Mhm.
eczema's so bad. Guess what? I end up recreating it through thought. That's the nocebo effect.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
there's 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 an extreme version as well, where if one is given a diagnosis of, let's say, an incurable cancer from an oncologist, a well-meaning,
Right.
they're using that's what they say, that's what the data says. But if they give that diagnosis, or prognosis rather, for that diagnosis, that is enough, apparently, for the mind to close down the body or shut the body down within that space of time. I saw that on The Truth
Yes.
About Cancer as well,
Yes.
and I
Yes.
thought that blew my
Mhm.
mind.
Mhm.
And then I looked more into that with the likes of Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's I
It
love
is.
that guy. I refer to him as the father of epigenetics. You mentioned epigenetics in your intro. He
Right.
is a
Mhm.
brilliant
Mhm.
mind. He was cloning stem cells long before it became cool. And he's one of the people that I've also
Right.
verified this nocebo effect with. Anyway, we need to be mindful of the thoughts that we have on a day-to-day basis, and we want to be. I
Of
talk about
course.
flipping the nocebo.
Of course.
So if we're aware that we have this same negative thought pattern, we want to be having a positive thought pattern, and we can do that
Right.
consciously. The beauty about us as humans is we actually can choose our
Yes.
thoughts. We become more present. And that's where meditation and mindfulness comes into practice,
Mhm.
because we can actually be the conscious observer of our thoughts, and we can choose other ones. It just takes a bit of practice. So
Mhm.
I've said quite a lot. The mental piece of healing is huge.
No, that is fine. The mental piece, which is the
That was
third
the second
pillar,
pillar,
and
actually.
now
But yeah,
to the fourth pillar of your. Oh,
so we
the
did
second pillar,
physical. Nutrition is
nutrition,
within physical.
mental, physical. All right, of course.
Yeah.
Second pillar is mental. The third would
Can I
be.
just add one last bit to the mental piece, because I think this is really, really.
Sure, sure, please, of course. Yes,
One
yes,
of
yes, yes.
like the secret sauce for anyone to heal themselves is their mental
Hmm.
approach and connecting, just being
Hmm.
really connected with their why, and to have clarity on their vision. So my friend who I mentioned earlier, who
Interesting.
reversed cancer,
Very
he had a
interesting.
very strong reason for living. And recently, we actually lost a dear friend who we were both really
Wow.
wanting to help him, as well as other people. And it seemed that he didn't have that same incredibly strong reason for living. So I hope I'm not out of line by saying that. I'm
Yes.
leaving the name out as well. Anyway, if one isn't really, really clear on that, it makes the journey harder.
Stable, strong.
And that's why I think I call it a vitality vision, is so important, because we can determine. One of my
Yes.
clients who's 78, he's laying out
Hmm.
his next 10-year plan. He he says vitality is his
Yes.
vehicle. So his vitality,
Vitality
yeah,
is
because
his
vitality
vehicle.
enables us to do everything. Our
Love that.
vitality spills out into
This
every
is
area of
true.
our lives. And if we're sluggish and sat on the couch watching mainstream TV and
Uh-huh.
nonsense and eating crap and slugging around, it's going to end up
Of course.
is going to end up causing an effect, a negative effect on our lives and everyone else. So if we can actually go, okay, if I fill myself up and I create a vital body, how's that going to impact my family, my intimate relationships, my finances, my career, everything like that? And then I've got this process which gets really clear on that. Some people get emotional with this process because they've never allowed themselves to really think this way.
Yes.
And they go, oh, wow, I'd never considered this, or I want to be doing more. And that's where the mental piece, I think, is really, really important. So that's the second. Yeah. And that's also
Very
a quick
important.
summary
Very
of
crucial.
what's in that.
Yes.
The emotional one is next. If you're ready for that one.
Oh, so
Yeah. The
relevant.
emotional one,
Please. I am ready. I am
the
emotionally
emotional
ready.
is very tied to the mental. By the way, in terms of a hierarchy, I put physical at the bottom, then emotional, then mental, then energy, and I'll explain why in a minute. But the emotional one is
Please.
very connected with mental. I said earlier, it's often spoken about how 90% of illness is down to chronic stress. So if we're living by fight or flight, we're weakening the gut, we're weakening the immune system, we're more prone to chronic inflammation, we're more prone to all these illnesses and dis-eases. What if there were ways to create harmony in the body that none of us had ever known? So, and another thing, imagine understanding stress in a way that we weren't taught at school or growing up. I didn't know that I'm in control of how I respond to life's events. I didn't know that. It wasn't until I started diving into personal growth and human potential and the likes of Tony Robbins and transformational programs. I was like, oh, I get to choose how I respond to things. That's interesting. And I'm by no means a
Yes.
saint at this. Please know that. But I'm much better than I used to be. So I always use a traffic jam. I always use the traffic jam example. Two people can respond very differently to exactly the same circumstance. And my favorite definition of stress is it is our internal response to external strains. So it's how we perceive
Right.
everything. It's how we perceive our world, which, by the way, is one of the greatest determining factors on our epigenetics. Learned that from Bruce Lipton. It's how we perceive things. So if we can perceive things in a calm way, where we respond rather than we react, it actually changes our biochemistry for the better. So if in the case of the traffic jam example, let's say the traffic's moving fine and then there's an unexpected traffic jam. It all comes to a halt. Two people can have a completely different response to exactly the same external circumstance. One person can be super chilled, listen to music,
That
call
makes
the
sense.
boss, say I'm going to be late, and listen to a podcast, your one, Vitality Secret podcast,
Yes.
whatever, and just use that time and make use of it. And another person can be in exactly the same circumstance, and they will react and they'll start weaving in and out of traffic, swearing, cutting people up, causing road rage maybe, and you can virtually see what's happening in their face. It's like red veins popping out the neck and forehead. That is a response which is chosen.
Uh-huh.
And by the way, the reason we respond that way or react that way is really because of unresolved traumatic events and trauma, which is related also in the emotional pillar.
Of course.
So if we are overreactive,
Yes.
what that means is we're responding to a trauma from way back when, probably when we were 5 or 10 years old, which we haven't released from the body. And we're every single time something is of a vibration ultimately, which is mimicking that traumatic event, we flip. So releasing trapped emotions and trauma is another major part of the emotional pillar. In fact, a major part in this
Very
whole
major.
book is about releasing trapped emotions and trauma. It's often the last place people go to
Yes.
if they go
Yes.
there at all. A lot of people think you have to go and do talk therapy. You don't. You don't have to go and talk about the events. There's a term in neuroscience that says nerve cells that fire together wire together, or neurons that fire together wire together. If we if we talk about an
Wow.
event
Okay.
again and again and again and again and again, we end up giving more energy to that event, which creates new synapses, and it makes it
Right.
more of a thing,
Okay.
and it gives it more energy. Wherever we give our attention is where we give our energy,
Right.
and if we give our energy to traumatic events with
Uh
talk
huh.
therapy, of course it has its place, but I'm a fan of somatic
Yes.
release. So if
Uh
we
huh.
give an event a memory, all this
Okay.
energy, it ends up becoming more of a challenge, not less of one. So I like somatic release methods where you can
Hmm.
release the energy, which is traumatic events are stored as electromagnetic bundles of energy. If we can release them quickly and painlessly, that releases the energetic
Hmm.
charge of these events, which is huge.
Right.
I've had remarkable
Right.
results
Right.
with clients just by releasing trapped emotions, and many people all over the world have as well. And it's often the last place people go to. So, and it's often the root cause. There's a term. I'm full of sayings, and one of my favorite quotes is William Osler:
Oh,
"The organs weep the tears eyes refuse to shed."
okay.
The organs weep the tears the eyes refuse to shed. If we
Wow.
don't let that out of the body,
What a
whether
quote.
it's tears or with breath work or with shaking or with plant medicines or with whatever. There's so many ways we can do this, by the way. I use a process called the emotion code. Always love to give credit where it's
Yes.
due. And it's so effective and it's quick. So that's the summary of the emotional pillar, which is also tied into the energy one, because I've just mentioned energy quite a lot. Energy is really encapsulating it all. We are energy beings in physical bodies. One of my favorite
Hmm.
teachers in this is Dr. Joe
Hmm.
Dispenza and Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden, and there's some really cool people. I've attended a few of Dr. Joe Dispenza's advanced retreats, and in Cancun, I was very
Yes.
fortunate to attend these. Mind blowing.
Hmm.
And we should all be taught this from the moment we're born. The power of meditation, the power of visualization, heart and
Of
brain
course.
coherence. We can change our body, our biochemistry so fast with meditation and with all these practices which date back to the beginning of
Hmm.
time. They're not Joe Dispenza's practices. He's this ageless
Yes.
wisdom. What he's phenomenal at is teaching it and providing an environment where he guides you into a beautiful, deep state of meditation in many, many different forms. And he's brilliant teacher. So he is teaching ageless wisdom, which there's even more history I've dug
Wow.
into as to why we don't know this
Hmm.
stuff, which is a whole other conversation. Um, so yeah, that's the
Of
four
course.
pillars basically: physical,
Hmm.
mental, emotional, energetic. I believe the body can heal just about everything. The science of epigenetics is telling us that the organs can all
Hmm.
rebuild, providing we create the environment in the body conducive to healing.
Uh huh.
And we just need to figure out. We just
Yes.
I
Precisely.
like to think that we just need to figure out what is harming us and to stop doing that. Maybe what we're putting in our
Uh huh.
bodies, what we're exposed to, and then
Hmm.
changing our thought patterns, releasing all the trauma, getting rid of every form
Hmm.
of toxicity you can think about. You might have mercury in your mouth, or an
Hmm.
infected root canal, or a parasite, or a candida, or there could be anything. So just I talk about reverse engineering. It's in
Yes.
the title. Reverse engineer your illness, heal inflammation, and ignite your life force energy.
And one of the things that you also mentioned is your body's ability to heal is greater than you have ever been allowed to believe. And what you've provided and the insight that you provided with your four pillars of vitality really truly encapsulate this in the sense that, oh, we don't have to, we don't have to uh, take drugs, so to speak. I was really, really connected, or I felt really related. I related very well to the emotional pillar, and I love that you said that you give energy to events, and talk therapy isn't always the answer. You shouldn't always give energy to those events, and there's always ways to somatic release, right? And overall, it's about energy, what we put out there, and the kind of energy that we are exuding, the kind of energy that we are putting in ourselves at the end of the day. And finally, Neil, you talk about the father of
Epigenetics.
epigenic,
Epigenetics.
epigenetics. Okay, yes, and you are an advocate of epigenetics and the body's innate healing. Neil, what advice would you have for individuals? You already told this with the four pillars, but future with your work, how you move forward with your work. What are the future aspirations of Neil Cannon when it comes to advocating for epigenetics? And your what would be the last advice you would tell our audience and listeners and individuals looking to take a
I'll
proactive step
quickly talk
toward
about
their health?
epigenetics in as simple a way as I can. So
Please,
genes, epi means above,
please.
and then we've got the genes. So epi is above, and you've got the
Mm-hmm,
genes. So
mm-hmm,
consider genes as like the blueprint, and epigenetics as the software. Epigenetics
mm-hmm.
is the environment. The environment
Right.
signals the genes. It's not the genes
Ah,
themselves that trigger the illness. So
right.
this is profound. This is life changing.
Uh-huh.
It is literally global transformative information, and it's going to be, in years everyone's going to know this, but let's know it now. The environment in the body signals the genes. It's not the genes that trigger the illness. So we, by environment conducive to healing,
Yes.
if we have a genetic predisposition, like I've talked about eczema,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say my parents, one had cancer, one had many, many strokes. If I do
Mm-hmm.
what they do, and of course we've all got to die at some point, but I like to think, let's not make it sooner than it needs to be. If we do exactly the same as what our parents did, we have the same habits, same behaviors, same diet patterns, same thoughts, same beliefs, all this, the program ultimately. If we do what they did, then we
Yes.
have a much higher chance of following suit, you know, following in their
Yes.
footsteps. That's why they talk about a genetic predisposition. However, if we consciously change the environment in our bodies
Of
and
course.
we change, our approach covering everything, the physical, mental, emotional, energetic, we focus on not having an
Mm-hmm.
inflamed body, then we don't have to follow in their footsteps. You can come from a whole family of diabetes or cancer
Mm-hmm.
and not get it. And, again, something, we're going to die somehow. Let's just not make it sooner than it needs to be. Let's not biologically accelerate our aging process through
Mm-hmm.
inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So epigenetics is, I think it's a very empowering science. This is science to know. And it really puts us back into the driving seat. We can go, okay, what's
Yes.
creating this illness? Because it's self-created. A lot of people don't like hearing that.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, something else I should say is about what I'm saying is true for about
Mm-hmm.
98% of the population. About 1 or 2% of the population is born with defective genes. Defective genes meaning the environment won't make a huge difference or impact. They'll be expressed. Or genes that are fully penetrate, they're gonna be expressed somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning we're in less control as to
Mm-hmm.
whether or not that that
Mm-hmm.
genetic disease will take place. However, that means that 98% of the population, we have a lot of power as to the
Of course.
environment in our bodies and how our health is going to be, how it's going to be. I think that's really empowering.
Right. Okay. Is very, very important, very powerful, especially when approaching our overall well-being and our health. And that concept isn't really taught, right? That concept isn't something that everyone is familiar with. And I'm glad that you're giving that insight with us today, Neil. What does the future look like? What does the future look like for you? What are your future aspirations? Do you feel like this is an uphill battle, a losing battle when it comes to huge pharmaceutical industries?
I
And what can
I
we
think
do
we're
as
going through a very
individuals
interesting shift right now.
individually?
I feel it. I don't know if you do, but I really feel it. And I think there's a shift in consciousness happening. And I think
Mm-hmm.
more people than
Mm-hmm.
ever before are questioning the conventional
Mm-hmm.
systems. Even in America,
Mm-hmm.
trust in the mainstream media, for example, is at an all-time low.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't trusting it anymore because it's becoming very obvious. In England, it's less obvious, but it's obvious
Yes.
to me.
Yes.
Anyway, there's a shift happening. More questions are being asked of the medical system than ever before. I'm feeling it,
Mm-hmm.
and people in my everyone's talking about it. So something is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like to think of a battle with the pharmaceutical industry because
Yes.
that's never going to work. When does a war ever work? So
Mm-hmm.
I like to think,
Okay.
let's. What's the best way we can look at it? Look at it where it serves our
Uh-huh.
purpose and what serves where it's valuable, and then look at where it's not useful. Honor it where it's good, where
Mm-hmm.
it's not. We don't need to go into battle with it.
Yes.
And all I can do is, and
Mm-hmm.
among everyone else in holistic health, I'm not the only one doing this. Um, we're just sharing stuff, and it's going to resonate with the right people.
Yes.
And I think that shift is happening. And in terms of the future, I think I
Yes, of
honestly
course.
see a huge resurgence in energy medicine. Functional medicine is getting huge again. It deserves to have the spotlight shined on that one. I donate to that.
Huge.
Naturopathic medicine, all the natural
Huge.
medicines, approaches to medicine are coming back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is where I see the
Okay.
future.
Okay.
Energy medicine, by the way, is at the top. We are seeing profound shifts
Yes.
in the world
Yes.
of energy medicine. And there's technology, there's bioresonance therapy, for example, that can read your whole body with frequency and tell you
Mm-hmm.
exactly where
Mm-hmm.
you're in and out of balance. It can say you've got mercury, or it can say you have parasites, or you
Right.
have this, or you have that, and it reads you with frequency. And but the
Wow.
technology does date back almost 100 years now, but it's just resurfacing now
Wow.
because it
Wow.
was also suppressed by the same group of those who didn't want to create the pharmaceutical industry. So
Mm-hmm.
there's lots of that has been suppressed over the last 100 years is what I'm saying, and now it's all resurfacing, and it's really exciting. It's happening. So we can take the guesswork away with some of this stuff. But I'm getting everyone to do bioresonance now. Just at least try it. See what it picks up. It can even pick up your emotional imbalances, and it's spot on. Like how does it know I'm feeling this way today?
Wow.
Um,
That's interesting.
so yeah, we've got some incredible. Yeah, I mean, we didn't
Wow.
even
That's
talk
good.
about the body electric, but it's the backbone of my work. We are
Truly the
electrical
future.
beings. If we can tune into the fact that we're electrical, that a characteristic of every chronic illness is low voltage
Mm-hmm.
in an organ
Mm-hmm.
or in the affected area, and we remember that we're energy beings, we use these tools which can help us to diagnose, and
Right.
it's empowering. And I see the future of medicine as being energy medicine. In terms of me, I play my part. I've just started up a
It sure is.
community. I'd love to be collaborating more with pioneers in this field because there's so many, and spreading the good word to bring power to the people.
Wow. Yes. And power to the people. And you are one of those pioneers, Neil. And thank you again. We probably need another conversation about energy beings, us being electric beings. We probably need a whole other episode for that. But Neil, I would like to give you this opportunity right now. Where can we find you? Where can we connect
Yes,
with
thank
you?
you.
Where can we
My
learn more
website
about
is
what you do? And where can we find this book?
vitalitysecret.com. And my book is called The Vitality Code, or the 2023 version is The Vitality Code. That can be found on Amazon.
Hmm.
And I offer group coaching, and a community. Brand new community,
Uh-huh.
literally started last week.
Hmm.
What else? I've got the Vitality Secret podcast. I interview people who reverse
Right.
incurable illnesses, and
Wow.
I think that's answering the question. Thank you for
Oh. Hmm.
asking that. Was there something else?
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Yes, I am. I confess I'm not the best on
Are
social
you are
media,
you on any
but
socials? Are
Neil
you on
Cannon
LinkedIn? Are
Vitality
you on
on
Instagram?
Instagram and Neil Cannon 80 on YouTube and Vitality underscore
You're
secret
right.
on Twitter. Need to check. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Fantastic. I invite all our audience and listeners out there who's been tuning in right now the whole time. I hope you guys receive the same amount of insight and wisdom from all of this as much as I did. And of course, follow Neil, check out his work, check him out on all the social medias on LinkedIn, grab a copy of his book, and finally his podcast as well, the Vitality Secret, where you interview the pioneers like yourself. Neil, thank
I'm
you
going
so
to
much for
share
being
that
on the
quote that
show.
you also
Is
shared.
there
Your
anything
body's
else you
ability
would
to
like to
heal
share
is
to the
greater
audience
than you have
one
ever
last
been
time?
allowed to believe.
Truly, truly, truly. And that is such a great way to close out this
And
conversation,
thank you
close
so
out this
much for the
episode.
invitation to be
Neil,
on
thank you
this
so much
amazing
for
show.
being on here. And to our audience and listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And to all our audience and listeners out there, see you on the next one.
All right, so here's the thing, we try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.